Hello, everybody. My name is Ryan Gundersen. Today, I'm going to be talking about pre-flight checklists. First off, why in the world do pilots use pre-flight checklists? The biggest reason it comes down to is ultimately safety. Safety is the biggest priority in aviation by far. Throughout this presentation, I'll be diving more into the purpose, the structure of checklists, and how to properly use one so we can maintain that highest priority of safety. We'll get right into it. So the purpose, as I mentioned, is to make sure that the aircraft is ready to go to conduct a safe flight. We want to make sure the engines are operating within the standards they should be and everything else. We want to make sure it's all working well on the ground so that when it's up in the air, everything should be good. We also use these pre-flight checklists to make sure to reduce errors and forgetfulness. We don't want to forget to check anything that needs to be checked before flight. The structure of pre-flight checklists is very important as well. We want to make sure that they have a chronological order and flow, that they're easy to follow. You don't want to miss any items. And if you have to look away from the checklist for a minute, you want to be able to come back to the checklist and find your spot very easily without getting confused. You also want to make sure that the information on the pre-flight checklist is reliable. It should usually be coming from the aircraft operating handbook. This picture here is a picture of a pre-flight checklist for the DA40. It's one I've used a bit. It's really nice. It works very well. The structure, as you can see, is you start from the top on the left side, go down to the bottom, work your way over to the right top side, and then work your way down, and then on to the next page. It's got nice bold headings for the categories, and then the list of numbers of certain items to check. It's very easy to follow, works very well. This is what a good one should look like. You want to make sure that you are using a pre-flight checklist in the right way. There are two methods to use a pre-flight checklist. The first is line by line, and the second is flow pattern verify. Line by line, and as in the name states, is you check one item on the list, you go and make sure it's good on the aircraft, go back to number two, back and forth until you get through them all. The next one is flow pattern slash verify. This one is very time efficient. You are basically going to memorize a set of things to check in a category, kind of run through them all, and then go back to your checklist and verify it to make sure you got them all. They both work. They both do the same thing. It doesn't necessarily matter which one you do. You want to just make sure that you're using one of these two ways. In this presentation, I chose two things to focus on. The first being simplifying text and illustrations, and the second being vocal pauses. First off, simplifying text and illustrations. The biggest thing I wanted to work on was using text to jog my memory and to not read from it. I know in previous presentations that I've done, I seem to write a book on each slide, which is good because it's got a lot of good information. However, when it comes to presenting it, it's very hard to know what to say unless you sit there and read the whole thing first. So using those small little text for the bullet point is something I focused on today. And also I wanted to focus on using illustrations to enhance my PowerPoint and to not distract. I feel like the checklist picture I put in the slides was very good. It was a good example, and I think it helped solidify what a good one should look like. And lastly, I also chose to focus on vocal pauses. This was basically focusing on not using filler words such as and, right. There's a lot of different ones that you can use, but they can be very distracting. I tried to focus on just using a moment of silence instead of one of those words. I think that does the same thing, but it's a lot less distracting. So I was happy with how I did on that. Overall, I think the presentation went pretty well. There's always room for improvement. but I feel like I did pretty good on those two things that I tried to focus on. I caught myself still using those filler words a little bit, but not near as bad as I usually do, so pretty happy about that. Here are my references, and in conclusion, as I mentioned at the start of this presentation, pre-flight checklists are crucial to safety in the aviation industry. We want to make sure that we understand the purpose of them, the structure of them, and properly how to use them in order to maintain that safety. And lastly, I covered those two ways to improve my presentation, which were simplifying text and illustrations and vocal pauses. So if you focus on those tips I gave for both of those, you'll be able to improve any presentation you give, no matter what the subject is. Thank you for your time, and I hope you're able to learn something today. Thanks again.